All right. I'm here today with Rachel Arvizu, artistic person here in Tucson, Arizona. We're joined here today and here to discuss who she is and what she's done and how she's really expressed herself through her art and what she's doing now and what she will be doing in the future. So, welcome, Rachel.
Hi, thank you so much. I appreciate
Of course, thank you for joining us. So, we're just going to jump right into it. As an artistic person, right? What would you say your beginnings are, right? What really got you into art, right? Because that's your specialty.
that. Exactly. Gosh, that is a broad question, but very specific at the same time. So, um, I actually didn't start getting like full interest. I didn't start developing full interest in art until probably high school, to be honest.
Okay.
Um, of course, like there were times like beforehand where I had fun in my art classes previous to that, but it was really in high school that I started really nailing down like a specific passion for it. Um, and it was actually due to my high school art teacher. Shout out Mr. Long. I really appreciate because he was the one that really inspired me to be where I'm at today, which is actually a high school art teacher. So
Awesome. So then why art, right? I know you said you really got into it in high school, but why art? Why not like band or, you know, and
that's
another.
interesting that you said that because I was in band as
Oh, okay.
well. I played the flute, interestingly enough. Um, and my dad is actually a musician himself, and he was really in the beginning of my life. He was really pushing for me to like learn guitar, learn piano, things like that. However, I just never clicked with it the same way that I found like myself clicking with like um, visual media.
Hmm.
So that's definitely something I was trying to like find in myself, like musical interest. And I do, don't get me wrong, though, I do love my music, but playing it is a little bit different than listening to
Right.
it.
Right.
So I value music in that way, but definitely I would say I'm more of like a visual artist. So.
Okay. Awesome. So when we use the word creative, right? When you hear creative, how would you define creativity to those that are still kind of trying to figure out how to be creative or how to define creativity within themselves, right? So as you yourself as an artist, how would you define creativity?
That's a great question. Creativity to me is allowing yourself the space to create. It's a little bit, that one's a little bit tough, but in general, I would say that it's just allowing yourself that space when it comes down to. Because I noticed, especially when I was younger, it was difficult for me to like sit down and create. But if I actually opened up that space for myself, it's a bit of a different story. Like what I tell the kids all the time too, almost like that blank paper
Mm,
syndrome, where you're kind of staring at something and you kind of feel pushed to like feel some sort of like emotion or passion or
yep.
um, but it's not there,
Right.
and it's difficult to kind of grab that out of yourself, But just allowing yourself that space though is powerful enough, in my opinion,
For
for sure.
sure, for sure. Is there anything that you've done personally in that time of blank space, right? Because it's almost like just when you're trying to, or when you're forced to perform, not forced, but kind of pushed to
Hmm.
perform, right, out of your own wanting. Is there anything that you've done to kind of, I guess, deliver, for lack of a better word, of whatever that artistic to get out of that blank space?
Oh, ah, this is a great question. I do. This is a question that my students actually come up to me and ask them myself, like art block,
Mm, mhm,
essentially.
mhm,
So, or writer's block for those who are writers. So to get past that is, at least in my experience, what worked for me is to actually like, to be honest, like it's gonna sound a little bit funny, but to get past that blank paper syndrome, I tell the kids scribble. I genuinely do, because it fills up that space,
mhm,
and it gives you a little bit more something to work with.
mhm.
Because and if you're still at a loss after that, fill in the spaces with different colors. Make it a bit of a game. But even at the end of that, even if you're kind of like, I don't know if I really pushed myself, but like at the same time, you have something that you created. And a lot of times the scribbling with the filling in of the different colors and the different spaces and everything is like a super fun activity, and it's like really grounding as well. And it just gives you something that you've done. So um, to get past that, I definitely tell them to scribble quite a bit.
Oh, for sure. I mean, even as a pianist, right?
Mhm.
What I'll tell my students is that, even if you don't know what to practice or it isn't a time that you really want to focus on a piece of music in this case, right? Just play, right? Just play
Exactly.
something random. And usually from that randomness is kind of what you get, something beautiful, right? Whether that be a new song, whether that be just, something that a new exercise.
Mhm.
I mean, that's how food is, right? Just a bunch of random ingredients and then it just
Exactly.
happened to work and now you have all these new dishes.
Mhm.
So can you recall a specific time then when you had that creative block, right? That writer's block for those writers, that art block for as an artist. And can you recall a time where you had that, but you really overcame it and something beautiful came out of it?
I thought of something very specific actually. So I remember when I was in art school at the U of A, the University of Arizona. I was in a mixed media class,
Okay.
and it was my 300 level classes already, so they were upper level classes, and so I know that they were expecting a little bit more from me than like my previous classes. So as it goes. And then I had the opportunity to work with wood for the first time and do some woodworking.
Okay.
I was at a total loss. I had no idea where to even begin with something like that. I was just totally like enslaved. Like I had no idea what to do. And it was at that time where it was kind of one of my favorite doodles to do like on my homework paper. Sorry, my past teachers. But there was a very specific doodle that I would do on all of my papers. And I was doing it in that class during that day. And and that's all I was doing while I was trying to think of what I should do for this woodworking project. And then I was like, you know what? Maybe I should kind of translate this doodle into something that like physical like that. Like rather than like keeping it 2D on paper, transition it into a woodworking piece. And I did that, and it came out really wonderfully. It looks exactly like it did on my paper too. So I felt really happy with how it came out. But it was really I would say a lot of my inspiration comes from like my doodles a lot of the time. So I think that's where a lot of my like personal inspiration comes from. But definitely that very specific doodle. It is on my Instagram. Just throwing that out there. But I would say that was one of the most notable moments in my artistic career where I really was able to kind of push myself past that like art block because I just remember it was like crippling. I was like, oh no, I'm not gonna think of anything in time. Like this is gonna. I was getting so stressed out, and then I was like, oh, it's simple. It's right in front of me. It's on my
Mhm.
paper right here. I can totally utilize that, and I did, and it worked out wonderfully.
Right. Right. Awesome. Thank you.
Mhm.
I know you referenced to your past teachers right now, and then even you said your high school teacher.
Yes.
Are there any other mentors that really took a toll on your creative expression or your artistic journey?
Oh, definitely, Mr. Long. I mentioned in the beginning. Definitely, you were the one that inspired me to be an art teacher and be in the position that I'm currently in now. Um, and I would say, in addition to that, definitely my dad. He has more of a, like I mentioned, he does have more of a musical background and a writing background as well. But most of my siblings are pretty creative in that way too. So there's so many people. There's honestly so many people in my life that have really supported me and inspired me to be as creative as I am now.
Awesome. That's awesome to
Mhm.
hear. Are there any certain places or environments where you found that you can be, I guess, more artistically free than others? Right? Because obviously there's places where we find comfort, there's places where we find joy or sadness, but is there any one of those or anything, other than what I mentioned, anything that really just sparks that creativity that that if you were to go to that place that you were able to find some type of inspiration?
Absolutely. Um, definitely my childhood home, to be honest. I did a lot of artwork, and there was, obviously I have my whole past there and everything. So it's a really safe space for me, and
Mhm.
in my safe spaces, I feel most creative, to be
Okay.
honest, and especially my own home, where
Right.
we're at right now. Definitely here as well, and my classroom.
Okay.
Yeah, that's definitely pushing. That's one of the things like I try to keep it like a safe space for myself and also
Mhm.
of course my students. And so that's one of the ways I kind of allow them to have that space to like feel safe enough to create art and like delve into their emotions a little bit more and
Right,
translate that into art.
right.
So,
So, have any of your students ever pushed you as a teacher or just someone that, is creative to kinda get out of your comfort zone and be even more creative?
oh my gosh, yes, absolutely. There have been countless amount of students, honestly, countless amount of students that have really like given me so many ideas of like
Mhm.
things I'd like to pursue in the future,
Right.
or projects I'd like to definitely like I would definitely like to take on in the future. Um, yeah, definitely. I like my students are probably my number one inspirers. So.
That's awesome. Can you share a story about a project that you've recently done?
You know what? There's been a few projects that I've been working on with my students in particular,
Okay.
but I'll be totally honest. It's been very difficult for me to like sit down and create an old piece, like a piece of art for myself since becoming a teacher,
Okay.
and that is unfortunate. But like, I also find so many other different avenues for being artistic as
Mhm.
an art teacher, of course, you
Right.
know. So I still get that itch scratched for me, you
Okay.
know. So um, there of course like there are moments where I want to create an art piece for myself, especially if like one that I want to like express my emotions in and things like that. I just a lot of the times my time is spent lesson planning, grading.
Okay. No,
So
yeah, for sure. And so for our listeners that, let's say, are in the same boat, right, that are creative, want to be creative, but sometimes it just gets overwhelming, right? Because as a teacher, it's very easy to get caught up in a student or
mhm,
in the classroom or what's going on in the school. And then not even just that, what's happening at the school, but even behind the scenes, right? Like you mentioned, lesson planning, preparing for the day mentally, right?
mhm,
Even at the end of the day, it's easy to get exhausted and just not want
yes.
to do anything else,
Mhm.
right? So is there anything that you've done or anything that our listeners can do to where, hey, I may be tired, right? Obviously, I'm exhausted, but
How can I push
how
myself
can
to
I
do
push myself exactly
more?
to do just a little bit more, right? Because with that creativity, with that expression, it's for ourselves,
Exactly.
right? And
Yes.
so we as a teacher, we obviously don't want to forget about ourselves also.
Exactly.
So what can we do then as teachers to still have that expression,
And that is definitely something I struggle with. Remember myself,
right?
definitely. Um, but one way I kind of think of it as a way to like to achieve it during the day is to think of it as self care,
For sure.
honestly, because that's what it that's what it
Yeah.
is for me,
Yeah.
especially. So performing that kind of self care for myself is really valuable and
Hmm.
very powerful, and that's one of the things I really need to drive into myself recently because like I've been like I said forgetting myself.
Right.
So and that's so easy to do, and
Hmm.
that's so easy to do.
Yeah.
So
Oh, yeah, for
yeah.
sure. And I think sometimes people that don't have that or maybe don't use that profession of creativity, right? Or just that expression and really understand how that is a form of self-care, right? Because it's us expressing ourselves instead of, so for some people it's exercising,
Mhm.
for some it's, I don't know, just walking or I don't know, just listening to music even,
Yep.
something as simple as that, right? When others that do take art or music or writing, right? That's our way of doing it, right?
Yes.
So as what can we do then to support each other to really, I guess, I can not make it easier, but make it more just, I guess, what's
Achievable.
achievable, right?
Mhm. I get you. I get what you're saying. Um, it may not be the most wonderful answer, but I think just setting aside, carving out some time in your day,
Yeah,
even if it's to sit down and like, even if you're an artistic person, you really want to create art and like create like an actual piece of art.
right,
It's setting aside that time during the day, maybe even 10 minutes, just to be dedicated to that work.
right.
Put your phone down. Make sure the kids are locked away, whatever.
Get that little device where it, like, locks your phone for, like,
Yes.
5 minutes or an hour.
Yes, exactly though.
Right,
But even if you don't end up doing anything, just allow yourself to begin the routine
right,
of establishing a space for yourself to be creative.
right, right. And I think it's hard for us, right, as especially as adults where even having that space to
Hmm.
be creative, right? Like, when you start having kids or if you have
Yes.
pets or just you're caught up in your career, it's
Yeah.
it's so hard to not just make space, in your home, but also just mentally or in
It's difficult
time,
to
right?
prioritize.
It is, it really is. And I think that I tell my students this all the time, like, have quality practice over a bunch of practice,
Exactly.
right?
Yes. Quality over
Even
quantity.
if it's just 5 minutes, 10
Mhm.
minutes, but like you mentioned, like, at least do something that has to do with something that you love,
Exactly.
right?
The intention is powerful.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. How have you handled then, right? 'Cause I know you mentioned that sometimes you just have that block, right? How can you overcome it then? How have you found yourself to overcome those?
I guess a large theme of my art is doodles.
Okay.
A lot of it is, and for me, doodles are very mindless,
Mm,
and I'm sure for many of us out there. Um, because as I mentioned, I would always do it on my homework, my essays, everything. It was
right,
constantly all like the margins were constantly always filled up.
right.
And I think finding that almost like that mindless activity that you're like,
Yeah,
comfortable doing for like at least a few minutes at a time, like consistently. Like I could probably do it for like an hour, but I've worked my way up. But I think definitely carving out that time to just um, create art but mindlessly, just kind of let your pen and hand do the work. Keep your mind out of it. That may sound very difficult to do, you know, as thoughtful humans, but it's very helpful and very powerful, at least in my opinion,
right.
because um, it's just it's a great way to get creating something, even if it's not super intentional. Um, it is intentional in that way, if that makes sense.
No, I get you, I get you. Yeah,
Yeah.
oh, yeah. So, yeah, I wholehearteately agree, right? Even if it's just, I guess, not putting thought into it, but just doing it,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Because even then from there, like, it's just getting lost in what you love at the end of it. Even if nothing, right, lost in the sauce. Even if nothing, I guess, profound came out of it, it's like you're
Exactly.
still doing what you love, which I
And
think
that's
is
beautiful.
is
Yeah.
hard, right? Because I think today we live in a time where it's like, okay, if you're gonna do something, do it with a purpose at the end, right? Especially with time feeling so limited, right? And it's like,
Exactly.
okay, how are you using your time,
So
right?
much
I grew up
pressure. Yeah.
exactly. I grew up where it's that pressure, like, okay, you're gonna do it once, right? Make sure you do it right. Okay, what are you trying to do? Make sure you achieve it if you're gonna do it, right? And so now, even as an adult, I struggle with, okay, like, it's okay to just do something without having an end goal, right?
Exactly.
Without having that directional purpose, I guess would be the word. Um,
That actually reminds me of something specific when you mentioned
yeah,
this.
yeah, of course.
Recently, I did a project with my art students. It's called the Breakfast Journal Project. Have you
Yes,
heard of it
I've heard of those.
recently?
Yes.
um, the Breakfast Journal is by Carrie Smith. It's a wonderful journal, like it's a book,
Mhm.
you know, and there's prompts on every page on like different ways to wreck the journal.
Yes.
And one of the things that she mentioned in the foreword of the book is to lose all attachment to the outcome. And I think that
Yeah.
was such a beautiful way to put it because, like, I think especially my students, or all students in general, like, all art students, everyone who's artistic,
Right.
finds themselves at a point where you're like, oh, I need to. You're visualizing the outcome. You know, I see it in my head, and then as you're doing it, you're like, oh, I'm not
Right.
getting it. This
Mhm.
isn't right. This isn't coming out right.
Right.
It's okay. Be okay with how it is in the journey. It's okay if it's not coming out exactly the way it's supposed to. You're learning, throughout that process, you are learning and you are gaining experience.
Yeah.
And that is incredible on its own, like
Right.
put more value in the journey than the outcome.
Right. Yeah, for
So,
sure. Right. It's kind of like, don't get lost in the screen, right? For those that take photos or trying to live that influencer life, right?
yes,
Like, live in the moment,
exactly.
right?
That's
It
right.
makes me think of, I forgot what car commercial it was, but where the mom's trying to take pictures of the kids, and the kid's like, "Mom, like, we're here, like, enjoy it, right?
Yes, yes.
Don't just try to
I
like."
forgot what our commercial that was
Yeah.
too.
Not sponsored, by the way.
That's what I'm saying.
But, and just, right, enjoy that time that you're putting into it, right?
Yes.
Especially as sometimes it just feels like time flies.
Yeah.
It
Oh my
just
gosh.
really just flies, like, okay, today's, this day is like, whoa, where did the time go, right? We're in 2023. Where did 2021, 2022 even just go, right? It
I
just
still feel like we're
disappears.
celebrating New Year's 2012.
Right? The toilet paper shortage just
I know,
happened. So
right?
it's like, yeah, just enjoy, I guess, those little moments, right?
Yes,
Not even just in art or, in anything creative, but just in everything, right?
exactly.
I think definitely applying it to every aspect of your life
Hmm.
definitely when it comes down to it, you're like, okay, I've done this
Yes,
before. I know what I need to do. Right.
absolutely.
And in setting that boundary within yourself, I think that's the
Yes,
most difficult thing to do, setting that
it's so
boundary with
hard.
yourself, right? Telling yourself, okay, no, I need to know where my limit's at, and I need to know, okay, no, like this is for me, this is for my time, like,
Be
right? And
protective
just
of your peace and your time.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. In a time where we live with a bunch of technology, right, where we're able to literally see what somebody's doing from across the world, right, where we can catch up on a friend that we may have spoken to, 20 years ago,
Mhm.
right? How has that influenced your art? Would you say that it's helped it, assisted it, or would you say maybe that it's actually hindered it?
Technology.
Technology in general.
Wow. For my art, I would say my focus has usually always been in like oil paint
Okay.
specifically. Um, but I did towards the end of my art school career at the UA, I did start taking digital media classes essentially, and that it was a tough transition
Mhm.
to be honest. To go from oil painting to like working with like Photoshop,
Right.
InDesign, Adobe Express, like all of that stuff. It's really it was quite the jump.
Right.
But I found that I really enjoyed it.
Really?
I did.
Over oil painting.
I I oil painting has a very special
Right.
place in my
Of course, of course. Right.
heart. But
You listening, oil painting?
I know, yes. But I also am really beginning to embrace the idea of incorporating technology into my art. I love that too because um, I actually like a couple years ago now I downloaded Procreate.
Okay.
Oh my gosh, that was crazy.
Right.
It was
Right.
like mind blowing when I first started using it,
Mm.
and that was a beautiful way to like take my. Of course, you can draw on the go, but I felt like real cool with my little backpack and pen. Like
Right.
I felt really
No,
good
for
about it.
sure.
When you feel good about it, you start feeling good about your artwork.
Right.
You're like, oh, I'm making progress here.
Right.
Like, and that I think was really eye opening,
Right.
and then it really got me used to the idea of actually maybe transitioning to just working with
Okay.
digital art. So, of course, obviously, like I mentioned, I love my oil painting, I love my watercolor, I love my acrylic, but I'm also really interested in working with technology more in my art.
Awesome. So then you're embracing the technology and as it
Yes,
develops, right? So I
absolutely.
have to ask, okay, what do you think as an artist or even as a teacher about AI?
Oh my God.
Come on, you know it had to come up with AI being so
Oh
popular.
my goodness,
What
I
are
should
your
have
thoughts
known.
about AI?
You know, there are so many wonderful applications. I know that also that there are very scary applications a lot
Mhm.
of the time. So especially as an art teacher, it's difficult because especially like the AI art generators now,
Mhm.
like that can be a little tough for me.
Right.
Obviously, like I encourage my students to use them for inspirational
Mhm.
purposes
Mhm.
only, and even then they're
Right.
murdered. But definitely, it's something to consider as a teacher, like pretty heavily, because actually, like as an art teacher, it's a little bit different. As an English teacher, I'm sure it might be a little
Mm.
bit of a different story,
Right.
though. I'm
Oh,
sure.
for sure.
I'm
No,
sure. Yeah.
for sure. For sure. So where do you draw then the line of inspiration and plagiarism?
Oh
Right?
man.
Because me personally, I don't know how it works for art, right? As far as, okay, this is actually really close to what I saw on Google, right? Or in this case, AI, right?
Exactly.
And so where can that line be drawn where, okay, no, like this is AI, or you know what? No, it's inspired by AI, right? How can we differentiate that line?
I get you. I think definitely like pour in as much of yourself as you
Mm-hmm.
can into your artwork.
Right.
Because the computer can only do so much, it can only incorporate so much emotion, and it can be well done for what it is, but like nothing beats a person. Even like, and you can totally tell like with a lot of artwork now, like there is a difference there. However, with that being said, they are developing
For sure.
very heavily, like, and they're going fast.
For sure.
So Like I was using Adobe. Have you ever used Adobe Firefly?
I have not.
That one, it's a AI art generator, and that one that one I did use with one student in particular, just because the student was like really had a hard time visualizing what he would like to produce, um, which I think we can embrace on one end, like we were mentioning, like be okay with the process and the journey to like
Mhm.
getting where you're going,
Right.
But in this particular case, I decided to just kind of show them like a few ideas,
Mhm.
and it was really interesting because like you could put anything, like a squirrel flying off of the Empire State Building holding yeah, and
And it'll make it.
it'll make it.
Wow.
So like it'll be very specific, it will make it for you.
Right.
And when I discovered that, I was intrigued, also frightened.
Right.
So it is very difficult to draw that line there. And with this particular student, it did not inspire him much, to be honest. But it inspired me a little bit. So
Okay. Okay, no, yeah, for sure.
yeah.
So then in a time right now where AI is so heavily used,
Mhm.
right? Do you think it would be beneficial then as an artist to, I guess, embrace it, right? Because there's, this talk, right? Even when like, fast food chains were putting in that where you can order it on the screen,
Oh yeah.
right? And people were figuring, okay, well, they're coming after our jobs.
Oh
What are we
yeah.
gonna do? Like, okay, we're not gonna be hiring anymore. But it's like, okay, there's other thousand positions you can do in that one restaurant. But as in a place where AI is able to develop these, like you mentioned, these intricate photos or just art, how then can we be above that, right? I know you mentioned being unique, right? Pouring yourself into it, but how else can we then make it more unique above AI?
That's tough. That's a really tough one. Because even just the way that it's developing recently, like it is incredibly like intuitive
Mhm.
as well. And that I think is what's like really like I'm like kind of side eyeing AI a little bit. While it's helped me a lot as a teacher, like I've ChatGPT shout out, but um, it's still it's like I said, it's a hard line to walk because I'm still learning about it myself
Right.
too, and that's what's hard as well. Like the students are learning about it at the same rate that I am, so
Right.
I'm trying to like stay one step
Stay ahead of
ahead,
them, yeah.
and I'm like I'm like running, trying to catch my breath over here.
Right. No, yeah, for sure. It's definitely it's developing very fast. It's
Very.
very scary of the things that it can do now,
Yes.
and the fact that some are even coming up with programs where, there's like site checkers, right? And so where you can even bypass like, okay, was this written by AI and it won't be able to detect it anymore.
I
And
didn't know that.
it's bizarre because it's like, okay, well, how can you check, okay, was this a student's actual work or was this, you know, AI? And so I don't know. It's bizarre. It's fun to use, I think, but when it comes to creativity, I feel that it really just kills that. I don't know, that creativity that you find within yourself, right? Because then it goes back. Okay, a million people have done this. How can I do it better? Well, now I'm not just competing with people. I'm competing with technology
And then
now.
the fact that it comes out instantly.
Exactly.
It's like
Exactly.
whereas the person will spend like hours and days, weeks on a specific painting or something like that, and it'll be done in like 2 seconds.
Mhm.
That's just like super disheartening.
Right.
Yeah, so I
Right.
get what you're saying.
But I still appreciate the beauty and the intricate details that a person will put and pour themselves into their art, right? And obviously, I mean, I feel like you're always gonna be able to tell the difference between a person's, work and then obviously technologies, just because it's so it's very advanced, but it's still not the same level as a human,
Exactly. It doesn't
right?
have that like
And
I don't even know what it is either. It's just like a vibe.
right,
I don't know.
right. No, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And so as we're creating, I think, like you said already, right? It's important to pour yourself into it and just making sure that we are able to really just show ourselves in our art, right? Um, and with that, do you think that there, with your own art, and even from switching from oil paintings or to digital design or whatever new avenue that you have done, right? has there been any themes that really stand out in your art, right? That are unique to you as a person?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Actually, ever since high school, there's been a very consistent theme in a lot of my art.
Mhm.
And that a lot of time is mental health, for
Yeah.
sure. Um, of course, there are elements of like where I throw my doodles, like we're gonna throw those in wherever I can, obviously. But overall theme is definitely my mental health and the space around me a lot of the time, my
Right.
surroundings.
Right.
So,
So then how has your art shifted, right, as your surroundings have shifted?
oh, a lot. Because I remember when I first started being creative again, I was in high school,
Right.
and I was in my art room, my art classroom, and then like, I remember creating art in the library, and I remember loving those spaces. I remember loving creating art in those spaces because, especially in the library, because I had first period like a free period
Mhm.
essentially, and I was able to just kind of go into my own little zone, my own little like safe space in the library because no one else would be there like at 8 in the morning.
Right.
It's just,
People are
so
still waking up.
exactly. So I was kind of in there. And I remember putting in my headphones, and I would just break out my sketch pad, and I would just doodle for a while,
Right.
and that was probably one of the most beautiful experiences as an artist because that was like the first time me being like genuinely creative. That was when I like hatched as an artist.
Right. Oh, yeah, for sure. Is that something that you think that that pattern at least, right, that you've learned from anything before, or is that something that you've kind of not developed, but or learned on your own, but kind of just developed, right, as, time goes on, as something that you maybe have learned from somebody else? Or is that something that you think that you just did on your own
Like with my surroundings.
with your surroundings? Yeah, with your developing your art.
I see. So like I said, like a lot of my spaces, like I felt comfortable creating art in were like my high school because that's when I
Mhm.
first started and everything. But as I grew, I found that library is pretty consistently now that I think about it.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
because I remember really loving creating art in the at the library at the University of Arizona as well.
Okay.
And that was like another one of my little like, art spaces that I would like to create art in, um, and then of course the art building itself. I love like those creative environments, like where especially the art building because like we
Mhm.
were all like super like minded and it wasn't odd to see someone like kind of sitting on like outside their classroom on the floor sketching something. So that wasn't weird
Right.
at all. That was just kind of
It
like
was the norm.
it was the norm,
Right.
and I love like I think that's just a great atmosphere, and that's definitely something I try to like facilitate now as a teacher.
Right.
So,
So how even thinking to your students, right, what advice would you give to somebody to create that creative space?
ooh, it's gonna take some pushing. Um, but be open to it being in one of your familiar spaces too.
Mm.
Um, because the library I frequented, obviously the art building I'm constantly in. Um, be okay with it being a space that you are like familiar with and like frequent often.
Right.
Um, however, I mean we're all different. You may want to like go up to the top of the mountain.
Right.
Go sketch up there. That's cool.
Right.
But for me, what worked is just finding creative spaces in my spaces that I frequent essentially. So.
For sure. Awesome. Is there anybody that you've collaborated with that I guess was really fun to work with, right? One that just kind of pushed the boundaries of your art to do something different or
Hmm.
to do something new?
I would say um, most of my career background has been in education.
Okay.
However, there was one year where I worked as a typesetter for a peer-reviewed journal,
Mhm.
and I it's artistic, but it's a lot more like formulaic.
Okay.
Um, it's a lot more strict.
Okay.
Um, but I still had like for this peer review journal, I was using Adobe InDesign to kind of like set up the margins, make sure all the spacing between paragraphs were all good, things like
Right.
that.
Right.
Um, but I would say collaborating with that team was life changing because it kind of got it was around that time where I started taking those digital media classes too, so I was working a lot more on the computer
Mhm.
and it was really eye-opening, because I never really considered the idea that I would like ever be like a tech girl, you know?
Okay.
So that was really interesting to find out about myself. But working with that team though was incredible because in particular, my professor at the time, she was the one that recommended me for that job, and I was able to work with her like more closely as well. In addition to the classes that I was taking with her, and then I was able to kind of start working with our layout editor, and that collaboration between the three of us, I think, was really powerful because it kind of opened up an opportunity for me to do something different, you know, and that was really incredible, an incredible experience for me.
Right. Awesome. Thank you. How do you draw that line then, right? Because you said that there are certain things you have to be really structured at.
Yes.
So in creativity then, what line can we draw then to really either be structured or to be freedom, right? I know you mentioned earlier to kind of even overcome that artistic block, right, is just mindless doodling, right? Is there any way that, okay, I'm really struggling with that mindless doodling. Is there anything that I can do to structure or build a foundation on to get myself going as far as art?
I like it. Actually, that's a good question. Because a lot of times I think where students kind of, or students in general, like
Hey,
artists,
everyone's a student, right?
everyone's a student, but I would say a lot of times that's where people start, you know, especially when they're wanting to create art. Because like they've taken like their math classes, they've taken their English classes, and it is very structured and formulaic,
Right.
whereas the arts is more open ended, and that's hard for some people. And I respect that. But it's definitely something to push yourself past. But if you are in the mindset as it is, um, kind of go with that at first, if that makes sense. So
Okay.
like um, paint by numbers.
Mm,
I think that's a really structured
for
artistic
sure.
outlet.
Yeah.
That's really one way to kind of start being creative if it's new for you.
Right.
Um, or like I said, scribble and fill in those spaces with different
Structured
colors.
scribbling.
Structured scribbling, yes. But like kind of giving yourself like almost like a coloring page to work
Okay.
with, you
Never thought
know?
of it that way. Yeah.
Yeah. So like almost like a coloring page to work with. I think that's it's structured, but it's creative.
Right.
So I think that's a pretty good avenue to do that for. So
Okay. So then using that then, right? Have you seen that in your own art?
ooh, have I seen that in my own art? You know, some of it.
Okay.
Some of it actually. Because especially in the beginning. Because I remember like in my high school art class, like I remember like I hadn't done any of my figure drawing classes. You know, I had no gesture drawing, observational drawing. That wasn't in my vocabulary yet.
Mm, mhm.
And so I was kind of coming at it like, you know, like it was observational drawing, but I was doing it like I was like doing detail instead of just like sketching it out first
Right.
and then refining it. So I was very, I was trying to be way more structured than was necessary at that time. And I think that's what hindered me a little bit,
Okay.
but it's definitely an avenue if that works for you.
Right.
You know, everyone's different. So
Right.
yeah,
Exactly. Yeah. I think that, it's we especially with so much influence now
yeah,
online, right? That it's easy to get lost in, okay, this person did it this way, so maybe I have to do it that way, right?
exactly.
I need to
Yes.
try it that way, and
Mhm.
right, and then we get frustrated to where it's not working, and then it's like, okay, well, I'm not even gonna try anymore, right? And it's still disheartening, and you know, from personal experience, that's what's happened in certain things, and but it's just overcoming that, right? And just really being okay, you know what, I'm gonna try it again, right? And what is it like? You only fail if you don't get back up, right?
Exactly. Yes.
And so then how do you see your creative expression evolving then in the future?
Ooh. I would say that unfortunately, I would. It's been hard for me to like be consistent and like making progress,
Mhm.
just because like I
Right.
mentioned, like it's very difficult like for me to carve out that time, even though you should.
Do as I say, not as I do.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's hard for me to do because like I'm finally thinking back to the last time I created like a real work of art. It's been like maybe a couple of years,
Mm,
and genuinely I miss that. And um, that's one of the things that actually this podcast has genuinely inspired me to carve out that time, those 10 minutes to be dedicated to my own art. And I think with that, I would love to, I would actually love to dabble more in like technology, digital media, maybe get back on Procreate,
mhm.
things like that. So um, I think that's definitely, I would definitely like to incorporate technology more into my art. Um, Also, I mean, of course, I would like to do my oil painting and things like that too. But um, I think I could see myself doing like the technology avenue a little bit more now than I did previously.
Okay.
So
Yeah, for sure. And then
mhm.
especially, even then how it's developed now to make it so convenient, right? And I think
Exactly.
it's, technology, yes, it's a lot, but just the
Hmm.
conveniency that it brings as an artistic person, like, hey, I don't have to carry all the sheet music now. I can keep it all on my iPad, right?
Yes.
Procreate, you don't have to bring all these,
Different
drawing
pencils.
utensils
Yes.
or paper or
Exactly.
material.
Yep.
It's like, okay, it's just a
Just a
tablet
little
and a
tap
and a pen,
tap
right?
of a pen. Yeah.
And so I wanna focus back onto something that you said. You said real art. What do you mean by that?
But what
So you mentioned that you haven't really been able to do real art except, a few years ago. So what did you mean by that?
I would say to me, real art is like being intentional about
Okay.
creating. Um, Even if it is a mindless doodle, it is still an intentional art piece, like you're still having some sort of intention there. Um, I think when you go at it with that intention and with that like passion that you have, um, that's when you create real art, in my
Awesome. I
opinion.
like that.
Yeah.
Is there a time where you've had a project where you were intentional that just really pushed you to new limits that maybe you haven't done before, maybe you weren't comfortable with before, but you still ended up doing it and, something beautiful came out of it?
Oh, like I kind of struggled with a new like medium or
Yeah.
something like that. Okay. Probably another time in my mixed media art class. That class was very tough for me. um, was when I had to work with plexiglass.
Okay.
That one was really difficult because my idea was again inspired by a doodle. I hate to keep bringing back that, but like it's pretty heavy theme in my art. Um, but with that one, it was working with different triangles and like cutting the plexiglass into triangles and then like using a bandsaw. So I had to learn how to use a bandsaw, and that was a whole thing too. Anyway, um, um, beyond that, though, I ended up coloring each of the triangular pieces of plexiglass different primary colors,
Mhm.
so that they would like in the light they would kind of blend and like make the
Okay.
all the secondary and tertiary colors and all that stuff too. Um, but that was definitely one of the mediums that I really struggled with was working with plexiglass and like having to really familiarize myself with a bandsaw.
Right.
That was
Right.
tough.
And so I know you mentioned your high school teachers, right? And even at the University of Arizona, what role do feedback and critique play in your own creative
Oh,
process?
it's so important. Oh, it's so important. That's what I tell like in my advanced art classes, we are initiating our critiques,
Right.
things like that. So I stress the importance of that. Like I'm really on on them about that actually, because uh, especially in at arts my art school at the University of Arizona, it was I don't really progressed with those critiques. Um, it's really a communal feeling as well, like it's beautiful, like in its own, right. Um, just being in that circle and like sharing ideas, giving critique, um, positive comments as
Right.
well, like so it was really wonderful to see the ways that I could grow
Mhm.
in addition to the ways that I really accomplished my goal,
Right.
so it was wonderful seeing that recognized by my peers and um, and it was genuinely a really good feeling. It felt like um, a real communal feeling of like everyone working toward the same goal and helping each other work toward that goal.
For sure,
So
and just that sense of accomplishment of like,
exactly,
I did this, right?
absolutely.
Um, how do you document then, any inspiration that does come to you or any artistic idea in your personally, right? How do you document that? Like, okay, you have this thought, this bubble of, inspiration. How do you just keep track of that?
You know, I used to bullet journal a
Okay.
lot. And I really pushed myself like, well, you don't keep that with you all the time. And I love I also kind of kept like treated it as like a sketchbook.
Mhm.
So I always had it with me and I would always kind of jot down ideas. But as time went on, that became less convenient for me.
Okay.
The notes app on my phone is my BFF. So
For sure. And again, using that technology to your advantage,
exactly,
right? And just the
yes.
convenience from it.
Absolutely,
Yeah, for
yes,
sure.
for sure. Yeah, it's been helpful for me in remembering all my ideas because I have a lot of them, especially with my students. You know, they inspire me every day.
Right.
So I do have a lot of ideas on there. So
Right. Has there ever been a time where a student just really pushed you to your past your creative boundary? Like, just drawn inspiration from them, like, I don't know, something maybe you not may not have thought of it that way, or just really made you get a whole different perspective on how to approach art.
I would say yes. There's I can't think of a specific student, but I got that same vibe from like pretty much a group of them. You know, like I would say that um, there was this one particular student. He had a very specific way of creating art. Um, very like you should have seen his sketchbook. Very organized, and that really wasn't my way. Mine was my sketchbook was like an explosion, and seeing this sketchbook and how organized it is, and how like specific to like even just like the outline of each page, you know, like the sketches were like kind of laid out very specifically, and seeing it from that approach is a lot different for me. But I was also very happy to see it because I hadn't really seen that before. You know, um, a lot of the time my friends they had sketchbooks that were very similar to mine, and so seeing his thought process and his planning process that was different from mine was really incredible to see actually. Um, and there were a few students like that had just different approaches, you know. Um, and there were times where it was like, you know, it'd be different from mine, like even like say how to draw a rose,
Mm,
you know, that they may start with the leaves, you know, I start with the center of the petals, you know. So it's a different approach, but we're still kind of working for the same thing there.
right,
So that's it was when I became a teacher and like when I started really working in education that I learned to appreciate different approaches, different artistic and creative approaches,
right,
because it's really valuable and to share that and
for sure.
rather than keep yourself in your own little bubble and like, oh, this is the way that I do it. This is the only way I'm gonna do it. This is the only way I'm gonna do it forever. You
Right,
know, just like being open to different people's processes and planning process. You know, it's really valuable. I would
right,
say.
right.
Yeah.
I like to call it a creative shock or creativity shock, right? Almost like a
Yes.
culture shock, but it's a
Yes.
creativity shock, right?
Exactly.
I mean, you're taught one way, right? Obviously, depending on where you learned it from, but then you see this whole other just different perspective. It's like, wow, it's inspiring, right?
Yes,
It's very
definitely. It's
inspiring,
beyond
exactly. And so, I think that definitely as an artistic person, I think we should push ourselves to really experience other people's creativity,
Mhm.
right? And that's just how you learn and grow, and again, like you mentioned earlier, get that community feeling, right? And then you not only feel part of a community, but you also feel, again, like you mentioned, just that same goal, right?
Exactly.
Just to put more
Yes.
beauty into that world,
Oh, for
right?
sure.
Has there been a time where traveling, outside of a country or maybe to a different city, different state, where you just it really influenced your art?
You know, there was a trip that I took to Philadelphia, actually, in college. It was a community service trip, but I remember I had taken my sketchbook with me, of course I did. And I used that as like an opportunity to like scrapbook a
Okay.
little bit. And um, the sketchbook, looking back on it now, it's kind of like I have like tickets in there when we went to the museum, and or like I have like the plane tickets, or like a leaf that I found on the ground, like little things like that. It's really wonderful to look back on it and see that. But that city did inspire me a lot, and I really want to go back because it was beautiful there. Um, but definitely like the art museum there, that one was really beautiful to see. That one was incredibly inspiring. Like a lot of Andy Warhol's original artwork. That was incredible to see. And I would say that was probably one of the most inspiring moments for me after a trip like that.
That's awesome.
Definitely.
Awesome. Well, is there any final words or advice that you'd give to an artist, right, or a person that's wanting to get into art but just has been having second thoughts or putting it out of the way? Is there any advice that you give to them?
This is one thing I tell my students all the time. Um, it's to allow yourself, like whenever you're in a state of like wanting to create art or be creative in any way, be okay with being uncomfortable. It's because when we get out of our comfort zone, that's where we learn and where we grow. And a lot of that is like a lot of times people take that for granted. And when they get to that moment and you start there, I'm like, oh, you know what? I'm not creating art. I really like it. I'm not really liking this process. Be okay with that. It's like almost like healthy stress, you
Mm,
know. So be okay with being uncomfortable in that moment. Push past it, um, and you'll have a wonderful result from it. Seriously, and it that took a long time for me. It's not going to be perfect the first time around, but you'll definitely see the effects of that. And I think that in any phase of learning, you can kind of take that into consideration. It's just that idea of like, especially if you learn something new for the first time, like an idea that's foreign to you, be okay with just embracing the idea as it is. Be okay with being uncomfortable, and um, you'll definitely grow from it. Absolutely.
awesome. Well, thank you, Rachel, for your time and just the words of wisdom that you've given to those that are aspiring to be artists, or just maybe have that creativity block, and just different ways that we can overcome them, and really just again share that creativity with others, and again build that community. Right.